Welcome to the Wellbeing Uprising. I'm your host, Bethany Ainsley. This podcast is all about the real-life challenges that impact how we work and live, from burnout and stress to stigma, loneliness, and everything in between. Each week, I'll be joined by guests who've lived it, led through it, or are working to change it, sharing honest stories and practical ideas to help us create healthier, more sustainable lives. Because well-being isn't an optional extra, it's something we all need to work towards. So let's get into it. Today I'm joined by two powerful voices who combine personal experience with professional insight to unpack one of the most important workplace questions. If leadership won't talk about mental health, who will? Mark Philpott, CEO of NPH Group, champions proactive well-being and believes mental health should be embedded into workplace culture.
Access to mental health services is really difficult, and so there's an increasing responsibility on businesses to find ways of providing solutions.
I'm also joined by Alisdair Beveridge, Managing Director of the Bill Directory and founder of Walk Into the Light. He brings a deeply personal perspective to the topic of suicide prevention and is the driving force behind mental health advocacy across the Tees Valley.
If you look at the bill for taking time out, and you think that's high, wait till you see the bill for not taking time out.
In this episode, we explore the mental health challenges facing employees, founders and CEOs alike, and the cultural shift that happens when leaders lead by example. This is about changing the conversation from the top and creating workplaces where people feel safe, supported and understood.
There are people who might listen to this who say, I've got a member of staff who I think I'd love to go and talk to, but I'm so frightened of opening that firework, and then I've got an HR problem and all that kind of stuff.
With back-to-back video calls and constant notifications, our days move at such a pace that it feels like a luxury to pause, and it really shouldn't be.
The more you can do to help them in the workplace, the less likely they are to be off sick, sitting on a waiting list, waiting to be seen by a healthcare professional.
Mark, could you tell me a little bit about how your personal and professional experiences shaped how you think about mental health today?
Sure. I mean, my background started in the NHS. I was a chartered physiotherapist by trade. And then I had a 10-year stint in the Army Medical Corps. And then I came out and joined the corporate healthcare world. And then more recently, now running my own business, NPH Group, as a small business owner. So it's given me a whole breadth of experience across both public sector healthcare, the military, independent healthcare. And through that whole walk of life, I've experienced a whole range of different personalities and cultures and challenges, some very traumatic, others less so. And so it's given me a broad breadth of understanding about the nature of mental health in the workplace and how different scenarios impact different people in individual ways. And I think what I've tried to do during that whole sort of almost 30-year career to date is learn as much as I can about myself, first of all, in order that I can help other people more in the role and in the responsibilities that I've acquired over time, and recognizing that all those responsibilities are ones that as managers, as leaders, as business owners, we can choose to take forward seriously, but also empathetically, in order to help different people where they're at with different circumstances, and being flexible around that.
That's such a great mix of experience, and I really like how you focused on understanding yourself. Alisdair, I see you as a leader, particularly in the Tees Valley. The Walk Into Light project is phenomenal, and what you do is fantastic. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
With Walk Into Light, that's really gone from an acorn into a kind of healthy oak, largely because not just me, but other people, other business leaders, whatever you want to call it, have been brave enough to actually, back to your point, humble themselves enough to sort of make themselves a bit vulnerable, share how they've felt. And by osmosis, what happens is you open up a conversation that people go, if that tycoon there who from the outside in looks like he's got it all going on, or she's got it all going on, or they've got it all going on. If they can have a bad day, then maybe I can have a bad day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think what we need to do, and walk into the light, is not a morbid it's about suicide prevention, ultimately. When we break it down, the walk into the light message is really simple and really powerful. And it is that the one bargaining chip all of us have in common is time. Because if you give things time and you talk about your issue, people, it's a human response. Exactly. So what happens is, if you share it, act boldly, and unforeseen forces will surround you and come to your aid. And that's what happens, And I think in the business world, the people that want to kind of, talk about pull your socks up and it doesn't exist, they're lying to themselves. Are you with me? They're probably more, I think, the brave ones, the people that come and talk about it, make time and are part of the solution.
Absolutely. When leaders talk openly about mental health, it sets a tone for the whole organisation, and it shows that people are supported and it's genuinely encouraged.
And I love that, Bethany, because it as a former healthcare professional, there's always been this idea that in order to fix a problem, you've got to label it, and it is classic with diagnoses of problems. But one of the issues around mental health, and drawing on what Alice has just said about the conversation, is almost the more you can do to take the labels away from mental health and just create a normal conversation around day-to-day pressures and encourage people to talk. Because what I'm seeing, especially in the younger people that are coming in, and this applies, both from a family point of view, but also in business when you've got younger people coming in, the skills around communication and being able to operate outside of emails or outside of social media, where you can just have a conversation like we're having today, is so important, and probably much more important than whether or not someone's been diagnosed or has got a label of a particular condition, whether it's stress, anxiety, bipolar, whatever it might be, because that might be helpful in terms of channeling a direction for the professionals in terms of how they're trying to move you forward. But the individual, it's much more about, well, how do they learn to cope with themselves in the environment that they're in without there being a label that's on top of them, day in, day out.
Exactly.
It's difficult. If you own a business, there are people who might listen to this who say, I've got a member of staff who I think I'd love to go and talk to, but I'm so frightened of opening that firework and then it being let off, and then I've got an HR problem and all that kind of stuff. We have to be careful that we don't weaponize things from an employer-employee, and it just comes down to just take all of our work hats off. Just as two humans sitting down.
Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to simply listen and be present for someone.
Absolutely. And from a litigious point of view, that is a worry for business owners.
It
because
is.
They get
it.
totally trapped in this idea that they have to do the right thing by the individual person, whether they're labelled or not. But it lends itself to the whole rationale and reason for why it's so important to establish a culture of normal communication. And it's hard. It's not easy to do it. And look, we're all human. And as a business leader myself, you'll have good days and bad days where you'll be on point and you'll just be in the flow with a conversation with someone, and it'll feel great, it'll feel supportive, it'll feel positive. And other days you'll come in because of whatever's happened at home and you kind of lose your mojo for the day. And it doesn't come across that way. But letting your team know that that's part of the normal ebb and flow of conversation in the workplace. But what's most important is that you're having those conversations enables people to be less, I guess my point is that it enables people to be less structured around what they think they ought to be doing, because they allow the conversation to flow more freely. It's
a preventative approach, isn't it?
Yes.
So someone who's not feeling great, or they're going through a difficult situation, it's looking at how an organisation or an individual in the organisation can support that person to find ways through that. Have you got any top tips for that? So if they've not been diagnosed with a mental health condition, but they're not feeling particularly great, but you've noticed changes in that individual, what could an organisation do to help them?
Yeah, I mean, organisationally, and we're about trying to, from an occupational health point of view, deal with prevention or promote prevention. It's much, much better to put in place measures that help the conversation to come out early doors. And on a slightly off-topic but on-topic point, one of the passions that drives me is trying to recognise that unfortunately at the moment access to mental health services is really difficult for Joe Public, and so there's an increasing responsibility on businesses to find ways of providing solutions to employees in their working life from within the workplace, because getting access to healthcare professionals in the mental health care space, regrettably on the NHS at the moment is difficult, and waiting lists are very, very long. So it kind of brings the onus of responsibility back on business owners and leaders to recognise that actually, if you really want to keep your workforce productive and keep them engaged and keep a really positive culture in place, then the more you can do to help them in the workplace, the less likely they are to be off sick, sitting on a waiting list, waiting to be seen by a healthcare professional for a couple of years, costing your business a fortune. So the simple measures around providing, and that there is no perfect solution. There's no, like Alisdair was saying earlier, there's no one fit for all. But engaging with your workforce first of all and asking the question is a great place to start. Small focus groups, talking to different employee groups around what matters to them, around trying to create provision for enabling conversation around any related mental health issue would be a great thing to do. And then providing access to or the ability to signpost people, even if you can't afford to have lots of services in-house, because most, certainly SMEs can't, maybe the larger organisations can afford to have health schemes, etc. But smaller businesses can't, and they make up the vast majority of UK PLC as well. So just being able to signpost to different places, and Optimi is a great example for this, where people can access on their own terms, at their own pace, what's relevant to them. Mm-hmm. They don't have to become professional experts, but if they understand what it is they're going through and they recognise that actually the experience in some form is normal, then you can start to put in place simple steps and conversations and signposting that guides them in the right direction, and don't feel under pressure to fix it all overnight. Because so often these things take time, especially with mental health. It's not like spraining your ankle where 6 weeks and it's probably going to be okay and the swelling's gone down and the pain's gone. With mental health, it's usually a very progressive onset and a very progressive process of recovery. So recognizing that time and normalizing that as part of the culture is super, super important.
Now, obviously, there are times when things do go a step further and somebody needs additional help. What would you advise an organisation to do if they were in that situation?
They can make management referrals to organisations like ours, where people can be seen by a professional. They can be talked to in confidence without all of their medical information being shared within the company, which shouldn't happen. There are plenty of examples where actually that sort of practice of HR departments trying to take on the responsibility of looking after these cases and inadvertently collecting information around the individual can actually add to the pressure of the mental health of the individual. And it does happen, unfortunately. Yeah. One of the things we try and help businesses understand is that there is a real need to bring that privacy and bring that confidentiality back into a process. For sure. And there's good legal reasons for that, because nobody wants to be challenged in the workplace for handling the individual inappropriately. But bringing that conversation in-house, making a proper management referral with good questions about what it is you're trying to understand, so you can support and make adjustments for that person when they're getting back into the workplace, is super, super helpful.
Alisdair, just taking it back to Walk into the Light, I bet you've had some interesting conversations during those times. Do you want to tell us about one or two? Yeah,
sure. So over the years, I've been blessed with lots of happy ending stories, really. And that, by the way, the happy ending stories normally begin with a nightmare beginning. Yeah. And so the Walk in the Light obviously is a kind of a physical metaphor for exactly that. And I guess a bit like the seasons, after winter we get spring, the tide goes out, the tide comes in, night becomes day, all that jazz. During Walk in the Light, I just said on Friday night, I think it's Mike Tyson, this is a bit of poetry for you, said it best: everyone's got a plan until he gets smacked in the face. And in business, life is like that. You're going along absolutely wonderfully, then you get a regime change. And so some of the stories that I've had that are going to resonate more with me are probably things like I won't name names, but in terms of business, having to completely pivot, you know, and rebuild with worn out tools and all that kind of stuff. And what that does, it's creating possibilities. I think everybody on a really basic level is after hope, because if we've got hope in the future, we've got power in the present.
You're right. Running a business often means adapting to the unexpected. So it could be a change in leadership, a sudden pivot, or rebuilding from scratch. And the pressure can be immense. On average, 35 small businesses close each day in the UK. And SMEs who employ 16.6 million people are still facing a tougher climate than they were pre-pandemic. The pressures on business leaders aren't just financial, they're emotional and mental too. It's a reminder that leaders need to prioritise their own mental well-being and not just their teams. One thread that's really stood out in today's conversation is empathy and how powerful empathetic leadership can be.
I think we've got to be careful also about something you said, a small conversation by the coffee machine can have a massive impact, and you're absolutely right. I think also you've got to be consistent. I remember I had a customer, and he'd retired. He was in his late 80s, and he was great. He always wore a suit, and he had a big steel business, and he took a real shine to me. And every time I went for a cup of coffee, he'd walk me out of the car, and I'd put the window down, and he'd give me some pearl of wisdom. And he always used to say, "You've got to be consistent, son." He said, "If it's good today, it's good tomorrow. If it's not good today, it's not good tomorrow." And I sort of parrot that quite a lot. And it's a good reminder, because also how you treat other people, remember, everyone's watching you.
And that's being authentic to
Right,
yourself,
and it
isn't
is,
it?
yeah.
I always say to myself, look, can I go home at the end of the day, put my head on the pillow and be satisfied that the decisions I've tried to make during the day are ones that I can sleep with?
Absolutely.
And however difficult they might be. And by and large, I can do that. And it keeps you true to your values, because, you know, people talk about values and people have personal values, but they also have business values. But there is a conversation, a mindful conversation that leaders and managers and individuals can have with themselves if they choose to, which is, how true to my own values am I on a day-to-day basis in the workplace, at home, with family? And again, it's not easy, but taking that little bit of time out, maybe as a tool, that mindful approach to ask yourself the question, am I being true to what I really believe in? But to be honest, Bethany, I think these days, you know, a lot of people just don't give themselves that time to think about it. You know, one of the struggles I have is I still spend too much time in the weeds of the business. And I know that in order for me to move the business forward, I've got to get on the business. And part of that is actually creating some space to think about these issues.
It's so important that we promote the value of time and reflection, especially in the way we work now. With back-to-back video calls and constant notifications, our days move at such a pace that it feels like a luxury to pause, and it really shouldn't be.
If you look at the bill for taking time out, and you think that's high, wait till you see the bill for not taking time out.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You've got to have a bit of time, whether it might be going to the gym, putting your audio book on, walking the dog, you know, going and speaking to good people. If you've got a pal on the phone that you know every time you ring them up, they light you up, or you light them up, having those places. And if you do that regularly and you draw from all those little wells, you're not going to dehydrate yourself mentally. Do you know what I mean?
Brilliant. And Mark, if someone listening to this is struggling with their mental health, what advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, take a moment to understand that's where you are, and that there might be something going on that's worthy of a conversation with somebody. And just go and seek some help. Go and have a conversation with a colleague, with someone you trust, first of all. It could be a family relative. It could be someone you've got to know, like, and trust at work. But have a conversation about it. Don't sit on it and don't let it stew. Because 9 times out of 10, if you can just break the ice in your own head and go and have that first conversation, probably the issue is not as big as you might perceive it to be. And with a fresh perspective from somewhere else, you might start to see things in a different light. And everybody can do that, but you've got, it's easy to say you've got to have the confidence to do it. But then beyond that, I think it's about seeking professional advice where needed. And that can be in all sorts of forms, from psychologists to psychiatrists to cognitive behavioral therapists. There are lots of people out there who are available to help, but it all comes back to understanding, first of all, that there probably is something that you need to, if you're feeling it and thinking it, you probably ought to ask yourself, well, where can I take my conversation first? And then just let it take its natural course, but don't sit on it, would be my advice.
What's one thing that you'd like people to take away from this conversation?
The one message is that the stresses and strains of mental health is normal, and it's okay. And all you need to do, the one thing I would encourage people to do is just to talk, not to bottle things up. We recognize that in business it's really hard to get the balance right and move away from things being a tick box exercise. But my one thing would be just keep the conversation alive.
And Alisdair?
If anyone's going through something, the operative word there is through. And if you're having a hard time, try and look back and think, I've survived every hard day I've ever had, and I'll survive this one. So just keep going, stay positive, and give yourself time.
And if anybody wants to get involved in the Walk Into the Light project?
Yeah, if you'd like to, yes, so it's an annual event.
Yep.
If you'd like to get involved, if you go onto the Teesside Charity website or Headlight website, inquire or get in touch with me on anything, and I'll be glad to get you aboard.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me today.